Strange tales and strange encounters can be found in abundance on Craigslist. Nothing, however, could have prepared me for the terrifying event that followed my decision to sell an old table. Even though it was just a regular wooden table, nothing special, I figured that somebody else might need it more than I did. So I put up a post saying, "Table for sale, $50, with a few images and a brief description. I didn't expect much, maybe a few texts or emails from prospective buyers. My inbox lit up with questions though within hours. I focused on one message in particular. It came from a man by the name of Mark. There was a catch, despite Mark's apparent interest in the table. Before making the purchase, he insisted on seeing it in person. Normally, I wouldn't have agreed, but I desperately needed the money, and Mark's message seemed so welcoming that I realized, what the heck, what's the harm in having him over? He said he'd stop by in the evening after we agreed on a time. So, while I awaited his arrival, I cleaned the table and made sure it looked presentable. When he arrived, he appeared innocent at first glance because of his worn-out shirt and jeans. I welcomed him inside, and then we immediately got to work. About the table, its past, and my motivation for selling it, Mark began asking some typical questions. He continued to ask strange questions after I gave my best response. He inquired as to my living arrangements, the locations of each room, and whether I was by myself. Red flags started to appear in my head. I paused, but in the hopes that I was simply overthinking it, I gave him a quick tour of the table and the space where it was located. At that point, the situation began spiraling out of control. Mark grinned uncomfortably and said, "Mind showing me the rest of the house?" I don't have a paranoid streak, but I was feeling very uneasy. I politely declined Mark's request because I couldn't help but feel that something wasn't quite right about him. I informed him that I wasn't interested in giving house tours, just selling the table. He lost his smile and appeared to become agitated. I realized I had to quickly remove him from my home at this point. I informed him that he had to leave because I had another appointment. The real nightmare started right then. Mark's behavior changed from odd to outright hostile. His eyes were red with rage as he drew nearer, towering over me. I stepped back as I looked toward the door, my heart pounding like a jackhammer, but he grabbed my arm and tightened his hold as he commanded, "Show me the house, or else!" Fear erupted in my veins. As panic set in, I realized I had to escape. I retaliated by pushing him away and yelling at him to leave. Mark, however, remained steadfast. He swung a punch at me, which connected with my jaw and knocked me to the ground. Although the pain was excruciating, adrenaline encouraged me to fight back. I was able to get hold of a nearby lamp and swing it at him. He yelled in pain and let go of me as it made contact with his arm. He was right behind me as I seized the chance to sprint for the front door. He lunged, attempting to barge inside, and I slammed the door shut. Right on cue, I quickly locked the door. Using a variety of expletives and threats, Mark pounded on it. While Mark kept up his relentless assault on the door, I made a 911 call as quickly as my shaking hands would allow, explaining the situation to the dispatcher. When I finally heard distant sirens, it seemed like an eternity had passed before Mark's expression changed. When he saw that the police were approaching, he made one last desperate effort to escape by breaking through a nearby window. He then vanished into the night. I was in shock and disbelief because the adrenaline rush had worn off. When the police showed up, I described the terrifying encounter while trying to make sense of what had just happened. Fear, rage, and relief were mixed in unsettling ways in the wake of that evening. Mark had disappeared, leaving me with a broken window, a splitting headache, and a strong sense of vulnerability. He stole my laptop and some cash, but the trauma was much more expensive. Hey everyone, hopefully you liked the first story already. If so, be sure to leave a like and subscribe, and turn on the bell notifications. Thanks, you guys. You can find great deals on Craigslist, but you can also fall victim to scams and untrustworthy people. My search for a new car brought me into an experience I will never forget, one that was strange and terrifying. The story began when I came across an advertisement for a sleek BMW that seemed too good to be true. The images displayed a spotless machine that shone in the sunlight. I was immediately alarmed by the price, which was incredibly low, but my curiosity won out. Hey, maybe this is my lucky day, I thought to myself. To my amazement, the seller responded quickly to my message. To inspect the vehicle, we scheduled a meeting. Although the guy's texts were uncomplicated, there was an unsettling quality to his tone. Still, I made the cautious decision to continue. When the scheduled day finally came, I took a car to the given address. I was transported to a desolate place, the kind of place you only find in spooky movies. I parked my car far enough away to be safe and walked up to the address. The BMW was standing there, or so the sign of the vehicle claimed. As it turned out, it resembled a demolition derby-torn artifact from the 1980s. My instinct told me this was a trap, and my heart fell. I went up to the seller, a raggedy, wild-eyed eccentric who didn't look like the person in the Craigslist photo. Trying to keep a straight face, I asked how the car looked. Already feeling nervous, I said, "Why did you use these fake pictures, man?" The man's attitude changed in an instant. He answered, "What's wrong with it? You got a problem?" With narrow eyes and a high-pitched voice. I tried to calmly explain, "Look, I just wanted to see the car I saw in the pictures, that's all." So as not to worsen the situation, he leaned in closer, a sinister grin twisting across his face. "You think you're too good for my car?" I was in disbelief at what was occurring. I was struck with panic as soon as I realized how insane this guy was. He took a step backward, grabbing a hold of my arm like a vice, even though I knew I had to get out. I was struck by the stench of his breath, and I could see the madness in his eyes. With an air of menace in his voice, he growled, "You're not leaving until you buy my car." I was trying to get away from him, and my heart was beating quickly. I knew I would be in big trouble if I didn't think quickly. My survival instinct went into overdrive as I felt the adrenaline rushing through my veins. Using all of my remaining bravery, I blurted out, "Let me go get the money from the car and I'll buy it." Perhaps thinking he had won, he hesitated for a moment, letting up a little on his grip. I grabbed hold of my arm and pulled it free from his grasp. I scrambled for my keys and ran back to my car with all the strength I could muster. I could hear the man behind me yelling and swearing, but I didn't turn to look. With my tires screeching, I plowed through the obstacle and depressed the gas pedal. I could not get rid of the sensation of those icy, menacing eyes on the back of my neck. My heart was racing. I reported the whole terrifying experience to the police when I was driving away. I couldn't get over my worry that the crazy would come after me, even though they told me they would look into it. For weeks, I monitored my surroundings, changed my locks, and put in a security system. What was going through that guy's deranged mind ultimately escaped me. Is it possible that he was a genuinely insane person, or was just a desperate con man trying to scare away potential victims? Still, I gained insight into the perils present in the online market and the value of following my gut. That day, the adrenaline, the terror, and the bizarre encounter with a psychopath from Craigslist will always stay with me. So, my fellow bargain hunters, exercise caution and follow your instincts. They might just save your life. On a bright Saturday afternoon, my friend and I made the decision to sell a phone on Craigslist. Prior to this, we had completed several such instances, and each time was flawless. This time, we made plans to meet the buyer at the Vancouver Metrotown SkyTrain station. The individual on the other end appeared to be your typical Joe shopping for a new phone. Since we arrived at the station a little early, we spent some time chatting and looking at our phones. While I was waiting for the buyer, my friend held the phone that we were trying to sell. We eventually saw them. The two men appeared to be in their mid-20s. It was just regular guys, nothing alarming at first. However, as they approached, something didn't feel quite right. Their glance was far too intense for a routine phone sale. The prospective buyer declined my friend's offer of the phone. Rather than that, he paused, his eyes flitting between his friend and mine. Then, as quickly as lightning, they grabbed my friend's phone. She stumbled back and hit the ground hard because it was so abrupt. My friend struck the concrete and I was stunned, momentarily paralyzed. Though these guys didn't waste any time, I hurried over to her. They didn't simply take off with the phone. No, they pushed my friend to the ground, and when she hit the pavement, her face twisted in agony. With that, they were off, running for the door. I chose to go after them because I was so enraged. I had to act when adrenaline started to flow. They were about to head for the exit when I caught up with them. I tried to wrest the phone away by grabbing the guy's arm and pulling with all my strength. However, he pulled his arm free, showing me he was much stronger than I had thought. My experience was akin to attempting to halt a cargo train using only my hands. The second man pivoted, encircling me with the pair. Their eyes were wide with fear and aggression. They were furious and desperate. They were closing in, and I experienced a wave of terror. They were chasing us now, instead of just the phone.
Don't even consider calling the police or we'll make sure you regret it.
The threat made me feel as though I were being choked by a noose hanging in the air. I couldn't allow anything to happen to my friend who was still on the ground, injured and in a daze. However, what action could we take against these two frightening outsiders? My heart was racing like a drum and I was immobile, trapped in a nightmare. Though I had heard tales of Craigslist transactions gone awry, I never imagined myself in one. Cursing at me, their faces contorted with hate, they were boiling with rage. People were hurrying past, obviously to our terrifying ordeal, and I could see the chaos in the station. I wanted to scream for fear as tears welled up in my eyes, but fear held me back. My friend was equally helpless, still lying on the ground, recovering. The two of us were young ladies, far from help or safety. It became evident as the seconds passed that they meant every word when they threatened. I had to decide whether to let them go or risk our lives by defying them. I slowly retreated, letting go of the man's arm with trembling hands. As they turned and ran off with the stolen phone clutched in their hands, I was barely able to control my tears. With a sense of helplessness, we watched them vanish into the throng. With my friend's face battered and bruised, I assisted her in getting up. She hurt, but nothing compared to the terror we had just gone through. Surrounded by the apathetic stream of commuters, we stood there, trembling and confused. Both of us kept what had happened to ourselves and refrained from calling the police. We allowed fear to dictate our behavior because it was a strong motivator. That day lingered in our memory despite our best efforts to forget it. It came flooding back every time we glanced at a phone or heard about a Craigslist transaction gone awry. That day taught us a hard lesson. When it comes to online transactions, you can never be too cautious. Safety and life are sometimes more important than a phone.